Welcome back, fantasy fans, to another preseason Supercoach video. The trade period is done and the dust is settled, and while my review of each team's period got me heat, especially with Port fans and maybe a little so with Freo fans, it's time to move on and assess the part that I'm actually well versed in, what these changes could mean for Supercoach. We had a massive 36 players, I believe it was, move teams this period, which is huge for us who play fantasy AFL sports. In my fundamental series, we cover how to identify breakout candidates and players who are moving teams are looked at closely for a few reasons. So they often leave for opportunity they didn't have at their existing club. Last year, Will Brodie was a great example who surprisingly became pick of the year. They often leave to play a new role, which could be favourable for Supercoach. Last year, we saw George Hewitt move back into the midfield, and that was a great example of a player who changed roles as part of that move. And then finally, their movement can create opportunities for those who replace them or limit it for other players in the teams that they come in. So last year, I think Chera is an okay example of both. Combined with Fife's injury and him leaving, it opened up room for Brodie to play, while him joining Carlton probably limited Walsh's upside at the same time. So players can kind of be relevant for three different ways, and it's through these lenses that we'll try and assess where each of the 36 players ranks when it comes to the 2023 season. Now, with preseason yet to begin and many anticipating changes to the sub rule allowing for 5 on the bench, there is still much that can change, but this ranking can serve as a starting point for our 2023 watch lists. So without further ado, we'll get into prioritizing each of the players from those that should be right up at the top of your watch lists, or even maybe first picked when Supercoach opens, through to those who I believe are largely irrelevant. And yeah, please feel free to drop a comment for where you think I've got it wrong. I'm sure there'll be lots of opinions for players that I've underestimated or overestimated, or whatever it may be. But yeah, let's jump into it. It's just a good place to start discussing these players for next year. So starting off, Aaron Francis at I believe it's going to be a low 200s price tag and a mature age body. The former pick 6 from the 2015 draft never really found a home at Essendon. His best position or play came as an intercept defender. With his ability to read play and leap at the ball, he's got quite an impressive jump. Sydney have picked him up as a depth option to do exactly that, and that's what they talked about during the trade radio period. While it's unlikely he starts in round 1 for the Swans, if they pick up injuries across the preseason or impresses, he could be a viable cash cow next year. So deep watch list, and probably towards the back end of the deep watch list for Aaron Francis. Ben Long, so yeah, moved to Gold Coast. Having seen him play both half back and half forward, or smaller forward, we've kind of seen enough over the course of his career to not really consider him as an option for 2023. Billy Frampton, I think he averaged 82 or something like that in 2022 over his 5 games. Even though he's moving for more opportunity, he's already actually got quite a high average, which makes him very irrelevant given his price. Blake Acres, so once again, one that's kind of a victim of already having a successful year, priced at 83. He'll be mid-only in Supercoach and played as wing, meaning he's unlikely to have any Supercoach impact next year. Bobby Hill, so I think another one that could be priced in the low 200s, but as a small forward in the Pies forward line, I think he's unlikely to carry any relevance next year. Brodie Grundy, so this one's really interesting. There's been exactly one time that I can think of where 2 top-tier rucks played together and scored together well from a Supercoach perspective, and that was Nick Nat and Dean Cox in 2012, where they both managed to get AA, or All Australian, on the same side, and both averaged over 110 in Supercoach. In that year, they both managed to average 25 hit-outs and a goal a game. So if that's the blueprint to have a successful year for Gawn and Grundy in 2023, I think that's unlikely. I just don't think it's high odds given where Grundy and Gawn are at in their careers. But you never know, they might find a new twist to be able to, forge a path for 2 premium rucks on the same side, not having to follow that Cox Nick Nat model. But yeah, like I just, I like Gorn when he goes behind the ball, but I don't really like either of them as super coach options when they are going in forward of it. So, like I think he's probably like we have to wait and see this experiment. There could be something in there, but it's probably more likely than not that like just Grundy and Gorn, neither of them are relevant for next year. But yeah, I guess we'll wait and see. So Cooper Stevens, one that probably like not talked about as much as a move, just given it happened at the dying moments of the trade period with other pieces involved. But he's moving to the Hawks, who've lost both Amira and Mitchell, which gives him opportunity to be a potential cash cow in 2023. If he receives no discount, he should be around the 290k mark, having averaged just a tick under 60, but he could be closer to the 260k mark. One to watch in the preseason to see if he can snag a prominent role in the Hawks midfield to start the year, which might be easier said than done, just given the other young talent that they have in there that they're looking to develop. So maybe top of deep watch list, but he might go into the watch list for depending on how this shapes out. McStay, I mean, key forward, so just largely irrelevant. Almost by definition, very unfortunate for them. So Tucker, he should come in and make an immediate impact at North and should be priced cheaply around 270k. If he can hold the defender status that he had this year, he might be an option for next year, although he's never averaged more than 73 in his career, which he did as a wing in 2019. This combined with his injury history makes him, I think, a deep watch list at best. But if he gets a better role, maybe more inside mid-time, something like that at North, and potentially one that we could reconsider. So Griffin Logue, one of my favourite and maybe most underrated pickups in the off-season was Griffin Logue. The promise from Clarko was that he would share the same secrets that turned Gibson into an All-Australian defender at the Hawks. And while this is very appealing, Gibson never really put up premium numbers from a Supercoach perspective. I think like low 90s was kind of the peak of his scoring. And with a already like roughly 400k price tag on Griffin Logue, that will make him largely irrelevant from a Supercoach perspective. Rankine, a little bit harder to judge on this one. The back end of this year, he was actually scoring very well into the 90s. And I think if he got a fair bit of mid-time, he could potentially find some way to relevancy as a forward option. I just think that it's very unlikely in the first year at the Crows that they give him that opportunity and that role to really see him excel in scoring. So I'm going to pop him as largely irrelevant here, but I have a feeling of everyone that I put in the bottom tier, he's the one that could most likely break out. Jack Bowes, so should be a roughly 275k defender option who Dangerfield led the charge apparently on recruiting in this off-season. He's shown okay scoring as a defender at the AFL level, but was an established mid as a junior and was looking for opportunity to get back into there at Gold Coast this year and has supposedly been promised or offered opportunity to run through the midfield of the Cats. His price and his profile as a mature age player is the right type of pick or right type of combination of factors that could make him a really good pick. But we need to see how Geelong's preseason goes before we can jump on him with confidence. There is a chance that he may not end up best 22 or be put into a role that is less than favourable. But put him up on the watch list for now, just given the price and the potential there. Gunston, yeah, I mean, forward, just move it down to largely irrelevant. Even though Gunston has been like of forwards more Supercoach relevant than some of the others, but yeah. All right, I think we might do the next two together, which would be like Hopper and Taranto. So the two midfield acquisitions by the Tigers are the most relevant pickups in Supercoach this year, I believe. So Hopper was already an interesting prospect if he stayed at GWS, having averaged 97 in 2021. He managed just 57 in an injury-affected year in 2022 across 7 games. So depending on the discounting that he gets from Champion Data or Supercoach, we could see him at around the 330k price mark as a mid, which makes him a potentially an outstanding value pick. So, priced at low 50s basically, and he's gone 97 in the past. So yeah, huge value potential there for Hopper. Taranto, he managed 102 in 2019 and a 97 in 2021, but just the 84 in 2022 after both injury-affected games, but then also being played out of position, which affected his output. He is likely to be available as a forward option at the sub 500k mark, looking at 496k, which makes him very likely to be a very popular value primo as soon as Supercoach opens. I think the concern with both of these players, just by the way, is that they haven't had the best durability, and the Tigers system itself isn't as friendly as GWS's has been when it comes to Supercoach scoring. But this should be offset by the extra opportunity they get playing as primary on-ball options, despite Tigers still having players like Cochin, Prestia, Bolton, and Dusty who could all demand CBAs as well. Worth noting that Prestia and Dusty both obviously coming off or been injured over the past year, and Cochin's getting on in age. Finally, it's also worth noting that Taranto, Hopper, and Brun all leaving GWS at once leaves lots of opportunity for hidden GWS talent to shine next year and create some opportunities next year. So also relevant from that perspective as well. Okay, O'Meara. So he himself, I think, won't be relevant. Unfortunately, injuries he suffered early in his career meant that he's never really reached his full potential, and I don't see the move to Fremantle changing that. But his movement does affect the Hawks midfield, which, combined with Tom Mitchell, we'll talk about. But these two leaving open up pathways for other Hawks to shine. But him joining Freo could affect players like Brayshaw, Chera, Will Brodie, despite CBAs already being available with Mundy's departure. So I don't think he's going to be super relevant in and of himself, but his movement will affect others, so we can kind of chuck him down here. Maybe I should have created a different tier just for those that only affect others, but I don't know. There might not be too many that end up in there. Horn Francis. So he is likely to be too awkwardly priced in the low 300s to be considered an option. You'd have to be full drinking the Kool-Aid that him moving to Port is going to fix up all the problems in one off season, and he's going to be back on the ball and back to scoring his best, and even then he may not still be worth it. So yeah, just not really a real option. Hunt, irrelevant. I mean, he's a winger, just not a very good Supercoach role. I think what he's done mid-60s, mid-70s, which must be about where he's priced at. So not too much to worry about there. Corbett, he's a forward that may struggle to get games. So I think that's all we need to say. Dunkley. So after having been keen to leave the Bulldogs for the last couple of years, he finally got his wish. Supercoach owners will be happy to have him as a forward option. Or we have been happy to have him as a forward option, definitely. But he's left points on the table over the last few years, having just 38, 41%, and 50% CBAs over the last 3 years. So at least trending up a little bit, which is nice. Where he's moving to, Jared Lyons, who definitely was out of form by the end of the year, had 65% of CBAs, and that was the second most behind Neil. So expect Dunkley to take all of those CBAs and potentially then some. So if he's going from 50% in the year we've just seen to 65% plus, this is a nice tick up in midfield time and rotations. Won't be playing ruck and should be playing less time forward as well. If he has DPP status as a forward, he is a lock. If he's mid-only next year, he's still a consideration given the potential scoring increase we could see. It's also worth noting that his inclusion could help or hurt Neil, but I'm more inclined to believe it has a small negative effect, if any effect at all. His departure should also help both Bont and McRae, who saw lows in CBAs over the last couple of years coming this year, and could potentially help Bailey Smith as well, who continues to spend more time on the ball. So Josh Dunkley is very relevant for next year. Shaki, that's to worry, I almost forgot his name. I mean, where the key forward? Should have just made a key forward tier, but yeah, he can go with them. It's just irrelevant. I mean, he's not even probably going to get games. He's the depth option. I assume they play him as a key forward, just as a Wiedemann replacement. Maybe they play him in defence. I don't know. Junior Rioli. So, yeah, I mean, he's also never really been a Supercoach relevant option. So, despite his cheap price, I doubt he's really someone that we consider next year. Amon is what he is. I mean, I think he's gone low 90s, kind of high 80s range, but not a premium mid-only option. And Hunter has had premium mid-years in the past. I mean, in the 2020 season, he was up in the 112 average for like, I don't know, I want to say like 7 or 8 games before he got averaged, but I wouldn't really expect him to get back there. It's just, I think it's more like the Dogs' play style than anything, and I doubt he's going to replicate that success at Melbourne. I have a feeling they're going to ask him to do different stuff, and that's overlooking the other issues that he's had over the past year and a bit. So yeah, largely irrelevant. I mean, he could maybe break out. Maybe let's just move him more to the top, but yeah, like just not really relevant. Also, these two look scarily similar, do they not? All right, Liam Jones. So turning into a defender at Carlton saved his career, where he became very highly rated really as a defender after kind of being a bit of a laughing stock as a forward. After a year off due to the vaccination status, he has landed back at the Dogs, who have looked to bolster key posts at both ends of the ground. He is best 22, I believe, and could come in at a price discounted as low as 263k. But his last few years, mid 60s, was really the peak of his scoring, and never playing more than 19 games and turning 32 next year. After a year out of the game and the system, it's really hard to see him like being a useful cash gen option unless he gets a very Supercoach friendly intercepting role, which I just don't think is going to happen. Lloyd Meek. So, I mean, I just wish he was priced a little bit cheaper if we're being honest, but he should be around the 425k mark, which just makes it really awkwardly priced for next year. I believe he's likely to outperform his price, which was his 87 average, I think, from this year. But assuming the Hawks' preferred setup is 2 rucks, like we saw a lot of this year, and given he's likely to be sharing time with then either one of Max Lynch or Ned Reeves, it just makes him really hard to have like any higher rating than like a deep watch list. Because the reality is, if he was a solo ruck, then maybe you could consider him as like a value breakout option in a year where a lot of the other primo rucks could underperform. But as is, just the price and likely they're playing 2 rucks, I just think it's really hard to have him much higher than this. But we'll see. Crazy things have happened with the rucks. Speaking of rucks, Luke Jackson. So look, he could break out in 2023, and it wouldn't surprise me. He's improved his Supercoach scoring each of his first 3 years of playing. What is up into the low 80s now, something like that. But he could also plateau for his scoring or even go backwards, and that also wouldn't surprise me. With the potential to be used as a midfielder or in other positions, Fremantle could unlock scoring with creativity, but I just tend not to believe it until I see it. And in the meantime, he should detract from Sean Darcy's ability to be a premium ruck in 2023. So he is nothing more than a deep watch list, and it's partly because of how he's going to affect others. Henry should be irrelevant. Lobb should be irrelevant. Wiedemann should be irrelevant. I mean, key rucks. Key forwards. What are we going to say? Tanner Bruin. So, having been regularly rotated through the GWS midfield, he saw approximately 25% CBAs in games he played last year. So unless he is going to get considerably more than that at the Cats, which I just see is really unlikely at the moment, he won't be a viable start even with forward eligibility. Bedford, I mean, small forward, not going to be relevant. All right. Berry. So, brother of Jared, he averaged just the 27 in 2022, which should see him as rookie priced. He's mature aged, which is a tick, and he's been brought in as a precious small forward to, I guess, replace Rankin in a way. So, I mean, that role obviously isn't great for Supercoach scoring or anything like that, but he might be a required pick depending on the other rookie options we get next year. So, maybe watch list. maybe watch this. That's like quite a high rating for this. I don't know. Maybe it should be lower. Tom Mitchell. So, I mean, there's a lot to talk about with Tom Mitchell, one of my favorites, so over the run. But between 2017 and 2019, Mitchell had 4 years of 110 plus. I was the top scoring player in at least one of those years. In 2022, he managed just 92 as Sam Mitchell moved him more forward of the ball and got him into different team roles to give other like opportunities to others in that Hawks midfield. So the question is, in 2023 at the Pies, which Mitchell do we get? That shouldn't have been a tongue twister. So will Collingwood give him that role that we saw him win a Brownlow in, and really be that Supercoach beast, or will he be asked to compromise away from that and away from his ball hunting best? Fly McRae definitely seemed to have a heavy emphasis on team pressure and defensive effort this year, which also saw lower Supercoach scoring out of the team as a whole this year, with really only Crisp and Dacos kind of being relevant as Supercoach options, and that was both because they had the defender status, which Mitchell we know won't for next year. Turning 30 next year, Mitchell is starting to get into that category of players we tend to avoid as well, but he must be on your watch list going into 2023. Probably the top of this tier as well. His departure from the Hawks, as kind of mentioned with Amir as well, opens up pathways for players like Ward, Cooper Stevens, John Newcomb, and Warple to become relevant in 2023. So big move. This Mitchell one could have all types of impacts. All right, down to the final two here, the ones everyone were hoping for, which is like Cordy and Setterfield. I mean, Cordy's a key defender, so largely irrelevant. And then Setterfield, I mean, many are pointing to him as this year's potential Will Brodie, a big-bodied mid who's been underutilized going to a new club. What could possibly go wrong? And look, while this could eventuate, we've seen a lot more of Setterfield at AFL level than we did at Brodie at the same point. And we just haven't seen the same ability to win the ball or score and scoop Supercoach like we did from Brodie. I also find it unlikely that he starts in the best 22 for Essendon next year, but crazy things have happened. So he is a deep watch list for mine, but I think unlikely to be super relevant next year. So that's it. That's everyone rated. It's a little bit of a shame that over all the movements, there really is just a handful that I think are like quite relevant for next year. From memory, even though we had like less than half, I want to say this many, we had about the same that kind of fell into this top tier. But yeah, let me know what you think. Would you have people rated differently? Is there someone that I've kind of rated low that you have really high on your watch list? Is there someone that you've got up quite high that you just think won't have an impact? I mean, yeah, maybe people are going to hate on the Berry pick, but whatever. He either gets a role and we need him or we don't. It's pretty simple. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, watching the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.